I don't think there were any acrimonious or violent debates, but it was a big, lively debate where we were caught on the wrong side because we were defending the Pakistan government, and we didn't want to swallow, we didn't want to believe that there was some atrocity going on in Bangladesh. We just didn't want to believe it. When the fall of Dhaka happened, we were in the common room. We saw Aurora coming in. We saw Niazi saluting him, giving him his sword or whatever, and we saw all that happen. And I must confess, our jaws fell, and there was a depression amongst the Pakistani community. But at the same time, as you see today, even after 70 years, we still don't have the capacity to be able to negotiate settlements with minorities, even amongst ourselves. So it was the same thing then. And I think Bhutto, despite him being such a big intellect and such a big charismatic figure, he couldn't negotiate. In 1970, I went to LSE, October. I was 19 or 20 years old, and got to LSE. First of all, you must understand the background. I was totally unprepared. Pakistan had damaged me. This education system was pathetic. We didn't know how to use a library. We didn't know how to do research. We didn't know how to write anything. So we went to LSE totally at sea. There were no telephones. There were no, internet. Nothing. We just happened to be there. And at the same time, the Vietnam War was happening. The student protest movement was at its height. The hippie movement was beginning. Everybody was dressed in crazy clothes. And, a bunch of us Pakistanis, straight cuts and looking like bloody fools, having cut clothes stitched from Pakistan, landed there, didn't have a clue as to what England was. So we started figuring out things, acclimatizing. Election happened in December. We were all Bhutto flunkies because Bhutto was a rising sun. We had adopted the left lingo. We had adopted Bhutto's lingo. We had adopted Roti Kapra Makan. We got there. And at the election, we were Bhutto fans. We were thinking Bhutto would come in. And we were also heavily West Pakistani and heavily Punjabi. I'll admit to that. I must say, subconsciously, never thought it out, but had a feeling for Bengalis which was less than equal. We did think that they were kind of lesser, and they were, and let's be fair about it. When Bhutto lost the election, Mujib came in. We were totally divided. We thought, no, Bhutto should get the thing, Mujib shouldn't, etc. I'm talking about the youth, the group that was there in LSE, nobody else but us. In the debates that we had, we still wanted Bhutto to get it. And then things started moving. Bhutto came back and said, hey, tum udhar, hum idhar. And things started unraveling. Intense debate that started amongst us, the Pakistani students out there. There must have been maybe all over London, there couldn't have been more than about 50, 60 Pakistani students, maybe 100, but they were there. And then there was obviously the Indian students. They were in a majority, but they were there. And they were accusing us of inequality, this, that, etc. Intellectually, we did accept, we did understand what was happening. But, being the sense of patriotism, the sense of, I must be loyal to my country, and, we kind of blamed the Bengalis. Again, I'm being very open with you, and I'm trying to recall, most of us felt that there was something wrong. March, when the operation started, the debate intensified because now fake media, fake news started coming in. The Pakistan press was saying that those Mukti Bahini rebels are coming in, and we are taming the rebels. BBC was coming in and saying that we had committed war crimes and that we had done this, we had done that. But our government was telling us something else. We only saw the BBC news at night. And for Pakistani news, we had to go to the embassy to get Pakistani news. And now and again, we could access some newspapers. But there was no other way. There was no internet. So you could sometimes get some newspapers. But newspapers, mostly you had to go to the Pakistan embassy to get. They were not available in the library. So, and they would, even if they were, they came in much later. Daily newspapers didn't come in. But we used to go regularly to the embassy to find out what's happening, and the embassy would give a briefing. And the briefing was always, no, don't worry, nothing's happening. There's a few rebels, we'll take care of them. BBC is exaggerating. Then, the University of London, we've been there, is very active. There is a huge debate going on all the time, lots of societies, lots of things happening. And, notices were circulating, and you knew something was happening here, something was happening there, so you'd go there and you'd pick up the debate. And, Indian students were obviously very anti-Pakistan. We were trying to put up a defense for Pakistan. But in the back of our mind, we felt something was wrong, I'll be fair. Yeah, we'd have debates, they'd come and tell us this, and we'd put our case forward. I don't think there were any acrimonious or violent debates, but it was a big, lively debate where we were caught on the wrong side because we were defending the Pakistan government, and we didn't want to swallow, we didn't want to believe that there was some atrocity going on in Bangladesh. We just didn't want to believe it. Come December, the war started. Obviously, all of us got more concerned, and obviously we started going to the embassy every day. Obviously, embassy briefings were given to us, and the briefings were always, no, don't worry, BBC is not saying, BBC is not correct, they've got it wrong. I remember the day the fall of Dhaka happened, just a few days before, 1 or 2 days before, Jessore had fallen, which is the border town, and then the BBC kept showing us that there's movement coming in. They had some footage. Again, it was not as if they had footage like today. They had footage, very little footage that was coming because it had to come in on plastic. There was no internet. So they'd show us things, but we wouldn't believe it. Because again, we'd go to the embassy. Embassy, no, please, this is all fake propaganda, fake news. Indians are feeding them, and this is happening. Then one day, we saw on BBC that, hey, BBC 9 o'clock news, that was the window to the world because there was nothing else then. 9 o'clock news, we'd all gather in the common room because living in a hall of residence. We'd all gather in the common room. There'd be a huge rush, and we'd all watch that. And then some Indians would yell something, we'd yell something. Again, it didn't ever flare into anything, but there was a thing. Good thing was everybody behaved in a fairly civilized manner. Then, when the fall of Dhaka happened, we were in the common room. We saw Aurora coming, and we saw Niazi saluting him, giving him his sword or whatever, and we saw all that happen. And I must confess, our jaws fell, and there was a depression amongst the Pakistani community for a day or two, and we realized that we were on the wrong side, and we realized that we had tried to defend an undefendable position. East Pakistanis, of course, they were offended, and of course the distance between us and them grew. And grew very rapidly. And again, within reason, we didn't, the camaraderie and the association, that fell through. And there was a certain, rightly so, they did have certain misgivings, and they did feel that they should not, that we owed them an apology, we owed them something. And that lived on for a while. Let me tell you another story on that. The place that I worked for, PIDE, Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, was set up in 1957. There were Pakistani economists on our side, sorry, I should say, West Pakistanis. We are never fond of studying, and we are never fond of it. Our economists were not that good. The Bengalis were the real economists. Bengalis had some good economists, and before you knew it, by the 60s, by the mid-60s, the Bengalis were dominating PIDE. Nurul Islam became the director, and the best Pakistani economists are Bengalis, and they were sitting in PIDE. And they had already started. Mahbub Haque and his wife was Bengali too, she was also in the PIDE. She did this analysis of inequality in Pakistan, where she developed the slogan, 22 families. Mahbub Haque was in the Planning Commission, popularized the slogan. So if you recall, I don't know whether you know this or not, 22 families was a big slogan, because Mahbub Haque said Pakistan is owned by 22 families. Bhutto picked that up, and Bhutto talked about inequality and made socialism the slogan, because he said there was exploitation going on. Now the Bengalis at that time, they had been working on inequality, and they in the PIDE did this in analysis on regional inequality. PID in the last days, in the late 60s, was full of regional inequality. A lot of evidence they put out. By 1970, the Bengalis had said, hey, this is unequal, that PID should not be only in Karachi, because it's in Karachi, that we want to take it to Dhaka too. So, by 10 years it will be here, 10 years in Dhaka. So PID had gone to Dhaka. And the basis for this inequality debate was laid in PID. And it was well documented. There was research on this, right? And when Dhaka fell, PID also died. So PID was then resurrected in Islamabad. It came out of the ashes. But the original PID still resides in Dhaka, known as Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies. Now, go back a little. There is an intellectual backdrop to all this. The Harvard Advisory Group that came and taught us planning, and that told us that we should plan our economy, and the planning was going to be based on high rates of return. Where do you get the best rates of return? How do you use your capital? Same thing that you are doing in any business. Any business needs to figure out how best to deploy its capital and how best to make money. Now, if anybody is running a business and they feel that the best thing is to make, for example, let's say you're running a food business, if chicken tikka sells well, you start making more of it. If roti sells less, you start making more of it. Based on that planning, we thought that, but not we, but the government thought, and Harvard Advisory Groups settled for that the best thing was to develop this side of the region before that side of the region. So that was convenient. So we began to develop industry and things here. Remember, because the way the partition happened, both sides were truncated because the infrastructure was totally cut in the middle on both sides, because everything was interconnected. Like Jalandhar is only 1 hour away from Lahore, but now we've never been there, and there's a sharp cut there. Same thing on Calcutta versus Dhaka. So the infrastructure had to be built, and we decided to build this infrastructure first. East Pakistan was, obviously because of floods, etc., was slightly more costly. Then, of course, jute was a cash crop in those days, a foreign exchange spinner. When the foreign exchange came in, we used it here. So there was legitimate basis for their complaint. But at the same time, as you see today, even after 70 years, we still don't have the capacity to be able to negotiate settlements with minorities, even amongst ourselves. So it was the same thing then. And I think Bhutto, despite him being such a big intellect and such a big charismatic figure, he couldn't negotiate. And he was too power hungry to be able to negotiate. And in the middle, the army also felt that the best way to do it was to force the issue. So all of us are to blame. Bhutto is much to blame. But then again, the whole model of development is to blame. Because but even before that, I think the partition is to blame. I mean, this was artificial. 1,000 miles of enemy territory, and you have two wings. I mean, that in itself is artificial. So I think we really, if we had the capacity and if we had statesmen, this thing should have been thought through very carefully, and there should have been a serious negotiation amongst the parties. But I'm sad to say we don't even have that today. We don't have statesmen who are capable of negotiating our problems. We tend to sledgehammer our problems, and sledgehammers don't work in human societies. As everybody knows, wars are not won through sledgehammers, as Clausewitz, etc. said. Wars eventually have to be negotiated. There's no question of decimating the other side. So there's a lot of soul searching to do, a lot of looking inwards to do, a lot of redefining our culture. Our culture is not a learning culture. Our culture is not a hard work culture. All these things have to be done. Bangladesh is doing well, but a friend of mine in the World Bank just wrote a very nice piece on this. Bangladesh, it's not as if they've outstripped us. They're still jogging alongside us. Maybe a little bit ahead, but in this race, a little bit ahead or a little bit back doesn't matter. It's a big race in a globalized world, and all of us have to catch up with the 21st century. And I don't think neither Bangladesh nor us, nor even India, we have not caught up. China is outstripping all of us, and US is way ahead even today. Europe is way ahead even today. So we really have to think about how do we catch up with the world.